GameFreak is a company that I have known for a very, very long time. However, it's been recently going down the dumps, and I haven't been able to keep up with it as of recently because I do like a bunch of other games. And I just haven't had time to play any Pokemon titles. So I'm going to figure out what's going on with Game Freak. Original videos in the description, and let's get into
Man, I'm
it.
finna whip this hoe.
Five frames.
If there's any game series that seemingly just cannot die, it's Pokemon. Red and Blue dropped nearly 3 decades ago, and the games have only gotten more popular with time. You got babies and boomers alike copying every new release. The demographic ranges anywhere from, I need to set up my 401k to, mommy, I shitted myself. I mean, Pokemon has sold more copies than the Bible. Don't quote me on that, just trust me, bro. Despite the popularity of the franchise,
Gotcha.
though, it seems like in recent years there's been a growing sentiment that the games just aren't good anymore. Somewhere along the way they lost what made them special and became hot garbage. A lot of folks attribute this to the game's developers, GameFreak, either being lazy or just incompetent. In my last video when I mentioned that I'll be talking about Nintendo in this video, several people in the comments were quick to point out that, hey, you know that Pokemon isn't actually developed by Nintendo, right? You know that it's GameFreak. It's GameFreak that makes the games. It's GameFreak that needs to be burned at the stake. But I think the problem is a little bit more nuanced than just saying, just take the bad game developers and replace them with good game developers. And it's impossible to talk about it without first addressing Nintendo. As a professional guy with opinions on the internet, I wanted to dive into this topic and ask, did Pokemon actually fall off? Plus L plus ratio? Let's find out. But first,
Yes.
let's set the stage. Nintendo
There they
is
go.
an old-ass company. It was founded in 1889 and originally made Japanese playing cards. They wouldn't step into the video game industry until almost a century later, with their first major hit being the arcade game Donkey Kong in 1981. 2 years after that, they dropped their first ever home console, the NES. Something that's been crucial to Nintendo's longevity is that ever since the company's early years in the games industry, they've never been one to follow trends. They were much more focused on breaking new ground instead of doing what everyone else was doing. I mean, here's Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto saying as much in a 1998 interview.
まあそれがトレンドなんで僕はトレンドの方を見ないようにしようとしてるっていう
Before Nintendo, game controllers were these eldritch abominations that you couldn't figure out where to put your fingers. The NES introduced the concept of a directional pad on the left and face buttons on the right. The SNES added shoulder buttons, and the N64 popularized the analog stick, all of which laid the groundwork for modern controllers we have today. Everything Nintendo did seemed like a recipe for success. The Wii initiated an entire era of motion controls, being the reason why we got the PlayStation Move and Xbox Kinect a few years later. I still haven't forgiven them for that shit. The company has never...
Me neither. I had one and it was alright. But the overheating issues of the original one was the main reason why I moved over and I got one for Christmas. You see the thing? I had to send back so many Xboxes, sometimes multiple times, back to Microsoft because they would overheat. It got so bad, my dad and I had to rip open an Xbox 360 and like put our own thermal paste in there. We got like an external cooler, so when you set up the Xbox, there's fans below it. It was horrible. I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. It sucked.
Focused on hardware power, but instead prioritizes innovative new gameplay concepts. Nintendo doesn't really directly compete with Sony or Microsoft. While the demographics do overlap, Nintendo targets their products at a different audience. The only real rival they had was...
Man.
Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog was created for the explicit purpose of competing with Mario, and throughout the 90s, he did a pretty damn good job. But after Sega left the console market in 2001, and Sonic would start appearing on the same platforms as Mario, the Blue Hedgehog wouldn't see the same level of success. Sonic would have a rocky entrance into the 21st century, and it'd be a long time before the series would find its footing. While Sonic tried to mature with its original audience, Mario stuck to just making good-ass games. When you try to age with your fans, you end up with Hedgehog with the Blicky. You don't want to end up with Hedgehog with the Blicky. Hey, you know what teenagers like? Guns, motorcycles, and of course, racism.
Disgusting black creatures. Get out of my sight.
Niggers?
Okay. Why would Shadow say that? Listen, I know he's a bad guy, but damn, he's like reaching Frieza levels.
Is this a racist cartoon?
The early 2000s
Yes.
came and went, and Nintendo kept doing their own thing. 1995's Virtual Boy, their worst selling console ever, Doesn't matter. They're gonna take another stab at 3D with the 3DS. Didn't sell nearly as well as its direct predecessor, the DS, but it also wasn't no goddamn Virtual Boy. 2012 would see the release of their second biggest commercial flop, the Wii U, but Nintendo was still unfazed.
I didn't know that the Wii U wasn't an extension for the regular Wii until I started watching these videos back on, like, I want to say 2018, long before or long after the Wii U lifespan. I genuinely thought it wasn't a new console, it was just a handheld that you could pair with your Wii. For the entire lifespan of it, the marketing was so bad. You know what's sad? I feel like it could have been successful had Nintendo just didn't flop the marketing so bad, because I didn't even know what was going on there.
They just kept innovating, and a short 5 years later, they got a head start on the 9th console generation with the Switch. They took the best parts of their previous home and handheld consoles and merged them to create a product that nothing else was competing with. Nintendo's approach to design embodies the blue ocean strategy, which conceptualizes the industry as a red ocean where many compete for the same customers. By innovating and creating their own blue ocean, they avoid competition altogether to satisfy demand that only they can supply. But over the past several years, Nintendo has been a lot more keen to adopt strategies used by their competitors. Remember playing games online on the Wii? Yeah, me neither. The connection was ass, but hey, at least it was free. Microsoft was the first to charge for online play, and Sony wasn't too.
I will never forgive Microsoft for that. The funny part is that they'll charge it on the Xbox, but they won't dare charge it on PC. And that, my friends, just goes to show what they think of the console gamer versus the PC gamer. Because listen, PC gamers will find loopholes. Console players, unless you homebrew it yourself, you're kind of screwed.
Far behind. Finally, word got around to Nintendo that they were leaving money on the table, and in 2018, after a year of offering free online for the Switch, they pulled the rug out from under players and locked it behind Switch Online, which, I mean, okay, it's standard practice at this point. Just one tiny problem. The online was still ass. Switch games use a peer-to-peer connection, which means that there's no dedicated server that hosts games between players. Each device communicates directly with all the other ones. This also means that they don't have any server costs and are essentially just charging you to use your own internet connection. Hey, just make it cheaper than the competition and people should be happy. While initially against paid DLC, Nintendo got their first taste of it back in 2012 with Fire Emblem Awakening. Now it's a surprise when a major title doesn't get DLC. Fire Emblem Engage got a DLC trailer before the base game was even released. When asked about adding in-game purchases to Nintendo's first mobile game, Mario Run, Miyamoto said,
こうなってるからこうなんですって僕は割と嫌いなんですね。僕らはどうしたいのかと。
Luckily, Fire Emblem Heroes and Mario Kart Tour came in to rectify that with microtransactions out the ass. Wait, you mean we can just charge whatever for these trash-ass controllers and people will just buy them? Anything other game companies could get away with, they could do, but better. 古川さん、私のチンチンは小さい。本当に？はい、見てください。完璧。Most recently, Nintendo learned that they can release games unfinished and just patch in the rest of it later as a free update.
Man.
Yeah, Pokémon.
Ugh, they did that with Nintendo Switch Sports so bad. They didn't even have golf. They didn't have golf. Oh, here we go.
Pokémon was the brainchild of Satoshi Tajiri, who was one of the founders of the game development company GameFreak. When he had the idea for Pokémon, GameFreak was on its last legs and he pitched the concept to Nintendo. With some convincing from Miyamoto, he got the green light, and 6 years of development later, Pokémon Red and Green released to immediate critical acclaim. After the game's success, Nintendo, GameFreak, and a third company who had also invested in Pokémon, Creatures, would go on to create a new company to manage the franchise, creatively named the Pokémon Company. Each of these three companies owned a third of this company, and this began a partnership that continues to this day. GameFreak develops the games, Nintendo publishes them, and Creatures supports GameFreak in development. Without the initial injection of capital from Nintendo and Creatures, it's quite possible that Pokémon wouldn't exist today. Even with their support, GameFreak nearly went bankrupt during development. The importance of publishers can't be understated, especially before the advent of Steam and self-publishing. Oftentimes, game studios look for larger companies to fund their projects or even buy them out entirely because it gives them security. Platinum Games CEO Atsushi Inaba said in a 2012 interview that Bayonetta 2 wouldn't have happened without Nintendo. Many games associated with Nintendo are actually from second-party developers with close ties to the company. Donkey Kong
That is
Country
true.
was made by Rare before being bought out by Microsoft. Fire Emblem is developed by Intelligent Systems. Kirby is developed by HAL Laboratory. Even Smash Bros isn't made in-house. But publishers aren't just publishing out the goodness of their heart. They're usually tied to the developers through a stake in the company or shared ownership of the IP. Such is the case with Pokémon. In addition to their 1/3 ownership in the Pokémon Company, they also have a minority stake in Creatures. Although it's still not enough to consider the Pokémon Company a subsidiary of Nintendo, it effectively makes them the largest individual shareholder. Also, all Pokémon-related trademarks are solely owned by Nintendo. The current president of Nintendo was previously a member on the board of directors at the Pokémon Company, and the president before him was previously the CFO at TPC. There's a lot of spillover between all of these companies. Leadership within large corporations is extremely incestuous, and being under new management is often just shifting around the heads at the top level. Painting Nintendo as a passive bystander that sits in the corner and watches GameFreak bastardize their most valuable IP is disingenuous. As the ones who entirely bankroll development, it should go without saying that they have influence over what happens with the series. While researching for this video, I came across some dangerous levels of cope from fans trying to do anything to shift blame away from their favorite
Well, your first mistake was going on Reddit. That's Copium City, basically.
corporation.
Ooh.
The simple fact is that the direction the games have gone in has been entirely congruent with Nintendo's recent business decisions, and a lot of the other problems are issues that have existed forever. I fell off the franchise.
Did they
when it
ever
first
fix
went
that? I
3D.
hope. I
was already
hope.
in high school by the time X and Y rolled around, and I'd moved on to more mature games like Angry Birds and Clash of Clans. I still had love for the franchise, but feared that my best days with it had already passed. So I kept up with the games from a distance, but for the sake of this video, I subjected myself to the most recent entries, Scarlet and Violet. Here's how that went. Just give it a second. It's still loading.
No worries.
Anytime now.
Yeah, it's cool.
Anytime now. Yeah, Gen 9 ain't beating the Dookie allegations. Everything you've heard about the performance is true. From the opening cutscene, I was greeted by nasty screen tearing, stutters, and frame drops. The game is glitches galore, and it's a toss-up what glitches you may experience. I saw bugs that I haven't seen anyone else get, and I've seen videos of bugs that never happened to me. You can enter a Pokemon battle and have nothing to look at but this. The camera will clip into terrain at random, maybe you'll even drop straight through the ground if you're feeling kinky. NPCs will continuously walk into an invisible wall before getting tired and ascending to the astral plane. Hey yo, what the fuck? Pokemon like this demonic ass bound suite will teleport from walking on thin air to following and preying on unsuspecting children.
Fetch me their soul!
The game's buggy, I'm sure you've heard by now, so I'm not really gonna harp on that. What I want to focus on
Oh
are the
my
things
god,
that
it's
can't be
even
fixed with
worse
patches. The
than I
game's core
imagined.
design and how it compares to earlier generations. It starts
Oh, you could see the grass appear from.
out like any
Oh.
Pokemon game. You take control of your prepubescent protagonist with a mother that's way too comfortable with you leaving the house, and a father that's out trying to catch a Miltank. Also,
Yeah.
this has to be Pokemon's protagonist with the least amount of drip. You got less sauce than a Little Caesars Hot and Ready, and the other clothing options are much better. You're introduced to your rival, choose your starter, and head out on your journey. Beautiful nature. Yeah, bro, this shit looks immaculate. From the moment you get your rideable Pokemon, damn near the entire island of Paldea opens up to you. There are 3 main quests, and you can tackle them in pretty much whatever order you want. Access to certain parts of the island are locked behind upgrades for your mount, a la Metroidvania, which you acquire as you progress one of the main stories.
Oh,
These
God.
upgrades basically replace the HMs of previous generations, and naturally opens up more of the overworld as you play, and I'd say it's executed pretty well. If you come across something that you can't get past, you're incentivized to explore and come back later, even though you can just break the game by jumping backwards. However, despite its vastness, Pokemon's most expansive world yet still ends up feeling like one of its most empty. Instead of tall grass, wild Pokemon roam the open world freely, and you initiate battle by either running into one or throwing a Pokeball. Only problem
Oh, so it's like Legends a little bit. I mean, fair enough, but I kind of wish they did like a hybrid of both. But have it show in the open world when it's a shiny, because there is not a better feeling than roaming around Arceus and seeing a shiny and hearing that little sparkle. It's next level.
is the game has a max draw distance of like 2 inches, so you'll be riding through the world and Pokemon will materialize
Oh,
directly in front of
Jesus.
you and start a battle that you never wanted to enter. NPCs also pop in and out depending on how far you are from them, and that distance is not very long. For moving NPCs, you can
What?
literally watch their frame rate decreases the farther they get away from you, and increases when they walk towards you. I've heard a lot of people blaming the Switch hardware, and while yes, the Switch is by far the weakest current gen console, I don't remember every other Switch game running like this. Breath of the Wild was
No.
an open world launch title that was also released on the Wii U.
And unfortunately, is still one of the best looking Nintendo Switch games all these years later. For reference, it is 2025. This game released in 2017.
Scarlet and Violet were released for the Switch and only the Switch. Zelda managed to have an open world on the Switch through tight optimization. One major aspect of game design is the constant search for the most efficient way to do any given task. Something as simple as creating grass for your open world is an extremely painful process with no shortage of external factors to consider. How do you render millions of blades of grass without crashing your game? Simple. You cheat. You only render what the player can see. You switch the detailed 3D modeled grass for less detailed 2D textures when the player is farther away. And this doesn't just apply to 4K ultra-wide RTX on next-gen titles. By its very nature, an open world is demanding on hardware. When developing for a weaker system, the importance of optimization is even greater because you're working with tighter limitations. It's a harder task, but as proven by previous games, it's not an impossible one. But even when you have a game developer with experience game developing laments the fact that Tears of the Kingdom is going to be restricted to the limitations of the Switch, there's at least one guy in the replies going, "Is graphics all that matter to you people? Not everything has to be 8K 300 FPS horse testicles. What about the gameplay?" When you don't design your game to fit into the box created for it by its hardware, this is what you get. But hey, it's not just performance issues. The towns in Paldea are dead. Those glitching, teleporting NPCs, you can actually talk to maybe 10% of them. The buildings, you can enter an average of maybe 2 per town, and the 2 that you can't.
Okay, now that's crazy, because I remember in the Pearl and Diamond remakes, you can enter every single building you wanted to. And I don't think that was developed by GameFreak. I think it was a collaboration between another studio. I unfortunately forget the studio, but they did a killer job with those remakes. And you can go in every single building. There is no excuse for Game Freak and their laziness and their poor optimization. And you can cope in the comments all you want. I do not care. It is not an excuse.
And enter are the same copy-pasted stores throughout
I
every
did.
single city. And wait, let me rephrase. You can actually enter 0 because the stores aren't actually stores, but menu prompts. Instead of the stores actually having an interior, you just get hit by a blinding white light and a menu pops up. Aliasing. Tasty. All of the other buildings are just for show. You can't barge into people's homes and invade their privacy. Like, that's a core aspect of RPGs. Going city to city in Paldea is basically just a beeline for the gym challenge, the gym battle, and then I'ma head out. There's no old man passed out on the street gone off that lean. There's no walking into an eerie town with unsettling music where everyone seems to be on edge, and then seeing this massive tower for you to explore. There's no casino to help children develop gambling addictions.
What?
There's a severe lack of
No.
content in the cities of Paldea. For Glaciado Gym, they went full mask off and just had 0 other buildings. Just Poké Center, gym, stadium. Like damn, bitch, you live like this? Hey, yo, where did all these people
What?
come from? The big metropolitan city of Paldea, Lavencia.
Oh, look at. Oh my god. I think a Sega console looks better than this. Oh,
It has these
brother.
gorgeously modeled skyscrapers that
Ugh.
you just can't enter. Sure would have been crazy if they let you enter the big eye-catching buildings. Lavencia does, however, have an actual interior to its sandwich shop, so that's
Wow.
something. It also has one of the hardest bops of the whole soundtrack. In fact, the entire soundtrack goes hard as hell. This honestly might be the best OST of any Pokemon game.
Levitating. Oh, wow. So we know where the budget went.
How cute. Hey, who's gonna tell her? The Pokemon battles are business as usual. Everyone knows what to expect from the combat in Pokemon games at this point. It's a tried and true recipe that still holds up. The gimmick this time around is terastallizing, which gives your Pokemon a goofy ass hat, but also allows you to change their type. It's an interesting concept that will
Oh.
probably be taken out back and shot in the head instead of actually being fleshed out in subsequent titles. Being able to do the objectives in any order was a feature I had a lot of fun with. I've never been one to EV train or really do any kind of min-maxing in Pokemon, but I do like when the fights are a bit more challenging. If my team ain't looking like this after the battle, I don't want it. I even had to use an X item for the first time ever. Doing bosses under leveled forced me to really interact with the game's mechanics, which are honestly deeper than a lot of people give them credit for. This also meant that I would steamroll the other half of the bosses that I skipped, but hey, I'll take what I can get. What doesn't have much depth though is the painfully boring minigame copy and pasted in every single Team Star base, where you run around and just press the R button for like 3 minutes. Not to mention, the bases themselves are all identical to each other, and so are the star mobiles that all the bosses fight with. The gym tests are also just tedious, simple tasks. It's more of a formality than an actual test, considering a lot of them just play the game for you. If you can't find Clavel and Lavencia, the camera just zooms in until you do. The trainers you need to find in Medali have massive text boxes pointing them out. If they're not painfully easy, then they're just painful. Cascarafa sends you on a fetch quest to a whole nother town. The Glaciado gym test is lifted straight from a 2009 spin-off game for the Wii, with half the frame rate of the Wii game. Japan still has an interesting perspective on black people.
Lyrical, miracle, spiritual, individual, criminal.
Oh.
Hey, at least we got some Whooper representation, you feel me?
Hey, yo, what's crackin' my nigga? What's
Aw,
poppin'?
come on, bro. We can't have shit. What did he
Is that
mean by
Charlie?
this? Oh, thank
Voice
God,
critical?
It's finally evolving. Hey, yo, what the fuck? Now's as good a time as any to talk about the Pokemon designs. They're kinda dookie. Nothing illustrates the creative bankruptcy of GameFreak quite like the terrible designs of every single new Pokemon. I mean, a donut dog? Seriously?
Yeah, talk to him, King. All of the new designs are trash. They don't compare to Gen 1.
Yes, thank you, Pikachu. See, that's what I'm trying to say. They just don't make them like they used to. Wait a minute, you're not Pikachu.
What are you
Wait a
talking
minute.
about?
Wait,
I'm
hold on a second. Jinx? Hey, wait. The old designs were kind of dog shit.
Yeah.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you want
What's
to
up?
farm some easy Reddit karma? Old design good, new design bad. You're welcome. This image has been around for a while now and always makes the rounds on social media whenever a new generation drops. It aims to highlight the differences between old and new monsters.
Why'd he catch a... Leave that poor bird alone. What do you mean, big ass head? He's so... It's just bigger head, simpler, less detailed. Big ass head. Leave that bird alone.
And how the Pokemon would look if they were to have their core design aspects
God.
swapped. This picture is a 2-pack of ass. Shit stinks. While the original artist is definitely talented,
Oh
the
my
image has been used to
God.
make an argument built on twigs and held together by duct tape. The idea is that earlier generations, specifically Generation 1, had these sharp angles and detailed body parts that were relatively grounded in reality. But at some point, Pokemon adapted this new design philosophy, where everything became more simplified and rounded to achieve a more cutesy look. You know, I never understood the term Gen 1er until I saw this image. If you go in looking for something hard enough, eventually you will find it. Certainly helps when you conveniently draw a line around whatever confirms your biases and exclude everything else. Gen 1 had 151 Pokemon. A sample size of 3 is nothing. For every 3 Pokemon that adhere to these rules, there are 6 more that violate it, but people ate this shit up. A handful of folks who didn't agree though would parody this image with their own edit, which swapped the old and new mons to show how disingenuous and cherry-picked the original post was. Any criticism thrown at the new designs can just as easily apply to the old ones. An ice cream cone and literal garbage? Man, Game Freak has really fallen off. Yeah, man, character design really peaked with literally just a Pokeball that evolves into an inverted Pokeball and a pile of sludge that becomes a big pile of sludge. Hey, how do we go about evolving this thing?
Another one. Another one.
Perfect.
I swear.
So perfect, in fact, that we should do that twice. Fuck it. 3-peat. Did I hear a 4? Clefairy and Jigglypuff embody all of the cute rounded traits that are supposedly only prevalent in later generations. Dragonite also falls under that, especially when compared to the other pseudo-legendaries. It looks like something out of Dragon Tales. Another criticism is that new designs are lazy. Flamigo is just a flamingo. My brother in Arceus. Seal is literally a seal, named Seal, that evolves into literally a dugong, named Dugong. And perhaps the most frustrating complaint is that a lot of the new Pokemon don't look like Pokemon, but instead look like humans in costume. Why are they making humanoid Pokemon with human professions? Like, Cinderace is basically just a persona. Huh. You almost have forgot about the entire Machop line. Bro literally
And Jinx, low key, but only
got
midgets.
on his little Speedo and a championship belt. That if that's not a human, bro, I don't know what is. Mine Xiao was created because so many of the old fighting mons had just been humans,
not reading all
which is
that.
ironic considering these were also in Gen 5. Humanoid and anthro monsters are nothing new. Oh no, the cat stood up on 2 legs. Y'all did not have the same kind of energy for Lucario. But don't get me wrong, it's not like there aren't any bad designs among the new ones. You got uncircumcised snake, tumbleweed, just ate some ass, steroid mosquito, expensive prostitute, Doug Trio from K-Lid, centipede with a mustache. Actually, what is GameFreak's thing with mustaches? Every single generation
I don't know,
has
it's
had
weird.
good and bad designs, and that trend still continues. Some bad designs they keep repeating with every generation. Shout out to ugly ass
Orthworm.
fish Pokemon with no redeeming evolution. Gotta be one of my favorite genders. While the range of animals and objects they're willing to turn into Pokemon has definitely expanded since the simpler days of Red and Blue, there hasn't been some drastic departure from what a Pokemon is. What has changed
Flash warning, Jesus, that could send someone to the hospital.
though is you, the player. Nostalgia and the Pokemon franchise are inseparable. It kind of thrives on it. It's the reason why the whole National Dex fiasco was such a big thing. Choose 6 monsters to carry you through your journey and build a bond with these inanimate lines of code before all 7 of you are eventually immortalized in the Hall of Fame. You're going to be a lot more charitable when looking back on those older designs. If a Pokemon like Geodude dropped today, let's be honest, we would collectively shit on it. I mean,
True.
I'm not immune to any of this. I have a preference for the older designs too. I try to make teams of only newer Pokemon when playing a new region, but aside from my starter, which I never bench, I only ended up picking up these 2. Tinkaton is a 10 out of 10 design, this is not up for discussion, and my inner edgelord was not gonna let me not get Celoredge. I mean, it's even got edge in the name. Also, folks seem to forget, but Pokemon is largely aimed at a very young audience, and children aren't going to view these fictional creatures through such an analytical lens. A lot of older fans started playing the games as kids, hence why they'd be less critical of past gens. When I asked my younger siblings,
It's like nostalgia colored glasses, you know? Like you're always gonna think the older is better because you grew up with it. Just because of nostalgia, and you overlook all the bad things with it. However, when it comes to glitches and bugs in Game Freak, you can't really argue that because you can literally look up bugs on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and scroll for hours and it won't really matter because there will always be new bugs. So they'll always be right on that, but when it comes to like Pokemon designs, there's so many of them. There's destined to be some bad ones because they're gonna run out of ideas, and I think that they started running out of ideas around Gen 5,
we had
honestly.
the monsters mentally categorized by region, what designs they did and didn't like. Their picks were pretty evenly distributed throughout every single generation. Also, I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. When I was like 8 years old, I designed some of my own Pokemon, and let's just say my standards weren't exactly high. This is Aquup. He's a water type. You can tell because he's a dog.
He's blue.
He evolves into Aquamut. This is Stumpy. It's a tree stump. You can tell it's a grass type because his legs are made of vines. Also, I made multiple Pokemon that followed
Is that
the
a platypus?
quadruped to biped pipeline before it became a meme. Hey, don't look at me like that. I refuse to believe your standards were any higher. Another thing to consider
They
is the
weren't.
shift from 2D to 3D, which also contributes to such a defined line being drawn between old and new. The newer mons have never been imagined in 2D, further distancing them from their older relatives in the minds of players. Many fans of the series, myself included, preferred when the games were 2D, but I don't think the shift to 3D was somehow the start of Game Freak's downfall. It just exacerbated existing problems. Ever since the success of Red and Green, Game Freak has largely been just a Pokemon studio. They've made some other games here and there, but mainline Pokemon is their bread and butter, and with each subsequent release, they refined their craft. We went from the monstrosities that were the beta sprites to sprites that actually resembled their concept art.
Oh my god, what did they do? That's
Pokemon started
crazy.
popping out Pokeballs instead
Oh
of just
my
manifesting out of thin
god.
air. Every Pokemon got an additional sprite and some squash and
Where's
stretch
Mew
to
3?
simulate movement at the start of battles. We got follower Pokemon, more elaborate attack animations, 3D modeled environments, and finally in Black and White, the Pokemon started to actually move, as all 649 had been given idle animations. Then over a decade of iteration and improvements would be thrown away in favor of stiff 3D models with cut corners and reused animations. Going from 2D to 3D isn't necessarily
Hurts.
a bad thing, but it's also not an inherent improvement. When you take something like manga and adapt it to animation, if you're not making the most out of that artistic medium, it's easy to create something that looks worse than the original panels. Just having characters move now isn't an automatic upgrade. Likewise, if you're going to animate 3D models, then you have to animate those 3D models. When looking at a static 8-bit sprite on a 3-inch Game Boy screen, your mind fills in a lot of the blanks. Sure, the sprites are posed in ways to communicate their Pokemon's personality, but your mind still has to do a lot of the heavy lifting
That's
to bring
crazy.
the still image to life. You understand that this is an abstraction of a real Pokemon battle. They're not actually two statues standing there and taking turns hitting each other. The closer the art gets to mimicking real life, the more has to be done to bring everything to life. I mean, look at Tyranitar. He went from this menacing monster to looking like he's about to ask if I got games on my phone. This extends to every single aspect of each game. When you're playing Fire Red and Viridian City and Pallet Town are 2 seconds apart, you understand that this is a simplified depiction of a route between two locations. When you can rotate your camera and spot the next gym a few meters away from the current one, it takes you out of the experience. Reading text box after text box felt natural when you were looking at top-down pixelated chibis. When you see a human character visibly emote and no words leave their lips, it's a bit jarring. I mean, you could say that the games still don't have voice acting to stick to tradition, but let's be honest, it's to save time and money. Man,
Absolutely.
the games would be so much better if they just stuck to 2D.
Don't be shocked if they get AI crap Pokemon and voice actors in like the next 4 games.
Nah, not really. The truth is that the games have always had cut corners. Those Gen 5 idle animations were achieved by taking 2D sprites, dividing their body parts into separate segments, and applying transformations on them individually to give the illusion of traditional sprite animation. You can easily spot this on a sprite like Golurk, where the top of its body just slides up and down over its legs, which remain static. GameFreak are so lazy, man. I can't believe they would take models from a 6-year-old 3DS game and put them in their new $60 Switch game. Damn, bro, that's crazy. Also, GameFreak doesn't even make the 3D Pokemon models. They never have. That's handled by Pokemon CG Studio, which is a part of the company Creatures. Yet, GameFreak still catches all the shit from fans. A lot of aspects of the modern games are being outsourced to other companies. Here's a list of companies that have helped during development of recent Pokemon games. Again, simply replacing GameFreak with a different company won't change anything, because as things are now, it's already not just being developed by GameFreak. Yet when another company leads development on a spin-off game, they're praised by fans and they should be the new mainline devs. Comparisons are often made between the modern 3D games and Pokemon Battle Revolution on the Wii. It was developed by a company called Genius Sonority and released 7 years before X and Y. It had unique attack animations for every single Pokemon, and instead of jumping up and somehow landing a physical attack from the other side of the screen, the Pokemon actually ran over to each other and traded blows. So are the games just advancing in reverse? Wait a minute. Take a look at this Kangaskhan. Wait. Zoom. Enhance. Why is he moving like that? I mean, the textures look okay, but there's just something off about it.
The tongue.
Wii games had better models than this. Wait a minute. Wait, stop right there. This is a Nintendo 64 model. These are Nintendo 64 animations. They ripped the assets from a 7-year-old game and used them across 3 console generations. Look, whether it's a mainline or spin-off game, reused assets have been a part of the series for decades. There
I didn't even
really aren't
catch
many
that.
criticisms of the new games I can think of that don't also apply to the old games. My homegirl champion Geeta has been catching flack for her suboptimal team, like all of the older battles were somehow peak game design. Ah yes, it was truly riveting gameplay when that Team Rocket boss sent out 6 identical Mons. Good stuff. Well done. But she's a champion. You have to compare her to the other champions. Well, okay then. I was on the edge of my seat when Lance sent out his 3rd Dragonite. Well-rounded team. Champion to your stuff, Lance. No, you have to compare her to Cynthia, the best champion. Her ace, Garchomp, is like the best ever. Okay. Counter-argument. It's extremely difficult to not have a selective memory when looking back at nostalgic pieces.
I hope those models and the clapping were actually sped up. Like, that can't be what's in the game, right? Right?
Media. So it makes sense when we reminisce on past generations, we tend to remember the best games from each one. Fire Red and Leaf Green are looked back upon more fondly than Red and Blue. Heart Gold and Soul Silver brought tons of new improvements to Johto. Emerald and Platinum are the definitive ways to experience Hoenn and Sinnoh respectively. They didn't get any of those games right on the first try. Gen 1 and 2 were both horribly glitchy. Emerald introduced double battles and made Hoenn's story more cohesive. Platinum expanded on Diamond and Pearl's story as well, and brought tons of quality of life changes. The ungodly slow game speed from Diamond and Pearl was bumped up to something more manageable, and many Pokemon sprites were improved upon. A large portion of the sprites shipped in a pretty rough state in DNP. Hitmonlee got his right eye falling off the side of his head, Staravia's beak is trying to migrate south, Gliscor got these beady ass eyes and no definition around its mouth, Registeel... Yo, what were they cooking with this one? All of these and a bunch of other ones would be remade entirely for Platinum. That's why when these new titles drop looking like they're still in alpha, I'm not really surprised, and you shouldn't be either. Yeah, the new Pokemon games are shit, but Pokemon games have always been kinda shit. These are problems with the franchise that have been there since its inception, but with the ever-increasing scale of the series and the jump to 3D, the cracks are really starting to show and getting much harder to ignore. The fans who grew up with the series aren't wide-eyed kids anymore. They do adult things like work a job and cry themselves to sleep. Spending $60 of their hard-earned money on a piece of media and getting something half-baked is understandably gonna piss off anybody. But the games haven't changed nearly as much as the people playing them and what they're willing to tolerate. Look, there are a whole lot of things genuinely wrong with the modern games, and it's cool to call it out, but we can do that without deifying the older titles as some flawless works that have nothing in common with the recent ones. A lot of us have just outgrown the series. I mean, we can't even seem to agree on when exactly it is the game started going downhill. Here's a thread from 2009 hating on Ruby and Sapphire. Here's a thread from 2012 hating on Black and White. Yet now Gen 5 is looked back upon as an underrated gem. It's a cycle that repeats itself every few generations. I'm sure a decade from now, people are going to be singing the praises of Paldea. Fans just like to be able to point fingers in the moment, and the easiest target is GameFreak. In a thread reminding people hating on the Gen 4 remakes that GameFreak didn't even develop the games, top comment, Junichi Masuda was still the director. They're not trying to reason with anybody, they just want to be angry. Sometimes they even come up with their own headcanon. That bugman Masuda still carries a grudge towards fans, mocking his magnum opus.
God.
Black and White. He led development, it was his idea to base it outside of Japan. It was his idea to include only new Pokemon and to make the game story intensive, but it didn't sell well. Fans hated the games he poured his heart and soul into, and he was devastated. It was at this moment that Masuda made a 180 and vowed to never produce any games with love ever again. Bro, did he make this vow to you personally? Like, where are you pulling this from? Imagine him walking up to the shareholders and being like, yeah, I'm a spiteful bastard, so I'm just gonna make the game suck from now on because I got beef with the fans. And they all just give him a thumbs up and greenlight the project. It doesn't matter that older fans are falling off the series because there are always just as many kids, if not more, getting into it. That's the nature of the franchise. That's what makes it immortal. So there's no need for anything to change. It's not just GameFreak. It's not just Masuda. It's not just the Pokemon Company. It's every single cog in this multi-billion-dollar machine. Every corporate entity involved with the games knows how much of a powerhouse the Pokemon name is. Nintendo's own internal playtesting team, Mario Club, is responsible for debugging and QA testing all the mainline games. It's right there in the credits for Scarlet and Violet. Nintendo knows exactly what state every game is in before it ships, and it still ships because it still sells. Pokemon perfectly falls in line with
Those
Nintendo's
playtesters were not done.
laid out earlier. Nintendo games have a history of basically never going on sale, and they never need to because they still sell. A pre-owned copy of Emerald is worth $200 because apparently even that still sells. Value is ultimately dictated by how much people are willing to spend, and Nintendo is very aware of that fact. Corporations will always act in the best interest of their shareholders, and looking at Nintendo's results for the last quarter, I'd say they're pretty damn happy. From their perspective, they're doing everything right. They can announce paid DLC for Scarlet and Violet 3 months later for over half the price of a full game and get away with it. And for people who are going to bring up another Nintendo game to compare turnaround times like Tears of the Kingdom, which has been in development for 5 years or so, Zelda games need to be polished to fly off shelves. Pokemon doesn't. Within the top 50 best-selling games, Nintendo's name appears 27 times. Only one of those is a Zelda game, and you can probably guess which one. Skyrim and GTA 5 catch shit for how much they've been milked, but Mario Kart 8 is about 9 years old at this point with no sequel on the horizon. Why drop a new game when you can just remaster old courses and sell them as pay?
This is Nintendo's GTA 5. without a doubt in my mind. I will give them shit for that, but I feel like a lot of people don't.
DLC. At the end of the day, all you can really do on an individual level is vote with your dollar. And as unimpactful as that may feel, it's still more impactful than bitching online. I can almost guarantee that the next generation of games are going to be $70 a pop, and I will not be copying. Shit, I mean, I don't even own my own Nintendo Switch. Huh?
What?
Oh, what was that? How did I play Violet without a Switch? Trade secret. I'll teach you when you're older. Shh, how did they get here so fast? We don't have much time. Quick.
You're gonna
Quick,
get
before they
copyrighted,
break in,
dude.
I need to tell you about this video sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant.org is an online learning platform designed to teach math
You put it
and
right at the
science
end,
in an
huh?
intuitive and
You know what? Honestly, with how Nintendo's gonna sue you for using an emulator, it's a good you got a sponsor. Congratulations on that. I actually really love this video. I would definitely check it out and give him a like in the description. I have it linked there just in case. It definitely got a few laughs out of me, but I'm glad he called out the older Pokemon fans that just constantly dog on every single new game that comes out from Pokemon. Now listen. Listen, Scarlet and Violet deserve it. But are the new designs that bad? Comment down below. I want to see what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe since you made it through a 40-minute video. You don't have a TikTok brain. That is your congratulations. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.